All right, I'd like to call the meeting in order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and I'd ask that we consider modifying the agenda for tonight. So I'll entertain a motion to modify the agenda for tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. First item that needs to be, and we'll go, I understand there's going to be quite a few, so let me do this first. So the first one is under appointments. I'm going to add an appointment for George Soliak to the Budget and Finance Committee. Okay, so we'll add that. And I'm also adding an appointment of Brian Reynolds to the Budget and Finance Committee.
No, it's not. He's sitting behind you there somewhere,
Okay.
if you want to meet him.
Other requested agenda items to be amended for today's meeting.
I would like to add two motions to go into closed session, one to discuss employee issues and the other one to discuss contractual issues.
Second that motion.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of adjourning to closed session after the meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll add that to the agenda.
Doug, I have, want to amend the agenda for first reading for changes to Resolution F03.
There's second to that motion?
Second.
Any first reading of F03? We'll cover that. It's in the board packet. We'll cover that during discussion. All right, other changes to the agenda?
One more change.
I'm sorry, additions and or changes.
Okay, under motion to rescind Resolution M01, that should read first reading of amendment to 01,
Right.
change to 01.
So for the record, change the description to read a motion for a first reading of M01.
Correct.
All right. Is there a second to that?
Second.
All right. Okay, any concerns? All right, we're going to change that to first reading. Okay, other changes?
Yeah, I have one. Just on the basis of the meeting today with Commissioners Bertino and Bunting, some board members and 4 residents, I'd like to withdraw my motion. The bill in question is not in final form. The language is expected to change before being enacted, and I believe the resulting bill will be more favorably define the issues in occupancy limits and some of the other issues that we've been concerned about. So I'd like to withdraw it at this time.
Question is,
Well, let's get a second first.
Second.
All right, question.
and that is in regard to, I'm sorry,
It's Bill 19-3 that the county is considering related to short-term and rentals in
all right, thank you. That's
Worcester
what I
County.
thought. Okay.
All right, other concerns on that one? All right, all those in favor of adding that to the agenda, or striking that from the agenda, excuse me, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any questions? Okay, good. All right, any other changes to the agenda or additions to the agenda for tonight's meeting? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to accept the agenda as amended with the changes
moved.
that were noted a few minutes ago to the meeting for this evening.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second? Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the agenda as amended for this evening, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item, approval of minutes from the August 14th special meeting. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes for the August 14th special meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? I'll entertain a motion for accepting the minutes from the August 14th organizational meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the minutes from the August 14th organizational meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes from the August 31st regular meeting as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the August 31st meeting minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes from the September 10th special meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the minutes from the September 10th meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, all the minutes have been approved. Next item on the agenda are president's remarks. I have a couple. So, coattailing off what Steve Tuttle had mentioned, there is a public hearing on Bill 19.3 or 19-3 regarding the lodging and rentals. It's in the Commissioners' Meeting Room, which is room 1101 in the Government Center at 1 West Market Street in Snow Hill. It's on Tuesday, October 15th at 11 a.m. As Steve mentioned, we had a meeting this morning with Chip Bertino and Jim Bunting on the matter, but it needs to be fully vetted to the public during that public hearing on the 15th. So I encourage all those who are interested in that topic, and apparently it has become noteworthy here in Ocean Pines. I strongly recommend that if you can make the time to get up there and attend that public hearing, I ask that you do so. Second thing I'd like to note is right now, some of the things that are going behind the scenes, I know that the finance department here in Ocean Pines works very hard, not only doing the normal day-to-day things, but they close the monthly books. Just an FYI that we do have a requirement that the monthly financials need to be presented, I think it's 13 business days, or is it 13 business days? Right now, with the implementation of the Northstar project, a lot of the time that is spent on the finance team is doing UAT, or user acceptance testing. That is taking a lot of the labor hours that are associated with what would normally be used for producing those reports. So I just ask for people to give them a little leeway with regard to producing the monthly financial reports. They are under a lot of requests for their time that are associated with things that are normally outside of the regular duties and are temporary in nature. So just an FYI to give folks a little bit of, again, leeway to make sure that they will definitely get the financials out for you, but it might take a little bit longer. And last but not least, I'm going to take some liberties, and if I get in trouble for this, so be it, because we do have an item on the agenda that I'd like to believe has a very good chance of moving forward. That being said, I'm asking that make an announcement that the Star Charities would like to have a remembrance for Anna Foltz on Thursday, October 24th at, I think it's 3 p.m. The details will be finalized, but it's in conjunction with renaming or dedicating the room in her honor. So if I'm out of context here, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure that that motion will get passed this way. So anyway, more details will come as we move forward with that, but I just think it's worth noting, and I just like personally to say that among others that Anna will be sorely missed, as I mentioned earlier, and many other people have. She was a very, very important person in the Ocean Pines community, and condolences go out to her family, and we'll celebrate her, not only by the remembrance of the dedication of that room, but just remembering all the things that she did for Ocean Pines, the Star Charities, and the other organizations that she was associated with. So many thanks to all the things that Anna did while she was with us. Next item on the agenda, the announcement of email votes and motions that had happened. Colette?
There was a unanimous agreement to vote on a motion to approve the extension of the secrets lease on the ocean parking lot at the Beach Club. The result of that was a motion to approve that extension. The motion passed. There were 6 directors in favor, Directors Tuttle, Horn, Perone, Rogers, Daly, and Parks, and 1 director opposed. So it was to approve the renewal of the lease, which is due to expire on 10/31/19. The purpose and effect was to extend the lease agreement between OPA and Secrets another 5 years, effective November 1, 2019, with an expiration date of October 31, 2024. The background was, for many years, OPA has granted a lease to Secrets for the use of the Beach Club, Bayside, and Ocean parking lots after closing time for the Beach Club and during the off-season. This lease has been mutually beneficial for both parties. The lease for the Ocean lot is due to expire 10/31/19. And as I said, that motion passed with 6 directors voting in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you, Clip. Next item on the agenda, the GM report. John Viola.
Okay, thank you, Doug. So for September, we'll start off with the Northstar system. Steve Phillips will talk to you. He has a slide on that. Steve's going to be here. He's here tonight. He'll get into detail on it. But at this point right now, we have a go live of October. We're on track. The Northstar representative is here. She's working with us, and everything is on track with that, but Steve will get into more detail on that. That's a big one, and that's coming up over the next month. The clubhouse. Yesterday was the groundbreaking. Josh Davis sent out a press release along with pictures. The board was there. Everything went according to plan. The follow-up communication, as far as concrete and the next steps, that will all start within the next couple of days. So the clubhouse, next couple of days, you'll see concrete work there, and they'll be starting. The projection is to go to May 1st, possibly June 5th. June 1st is in the contract, but we're striving for May 1st. Police building will start mid-October, same with Wayland. This is all part of the plan so that they'd have the same management team in there, and we can get economies of scale and savings there. So right now, everything on track, on budget. Cart Barn. Cart Barn should come. It's a prefab building. It should come the end of October. The demolition should start somewhere around mid-October. The building will probably be set in and everything. We're looking at somewhere around the 1st or 2nd week of November. We're working with the Golf Pro to ensure that minimum disruption happens during the busy time at the golf course. Bench strength, cross-training, performance reviews in prior meetings and discussions. You heard me talk about that. That's a big initiative we have in order to cross-train our team so that we have people in place so that there's not just one person in the future for each duty or whatever. So we definitely will have savings there. It's worth the investment that we're doing right now. Compensation study has been it's been a big one the last month or two. Michelle Bennett is leading that. It's a total team effort. All the department heads are there. They're working on it. We're waiting for Simpson, the outside firm that we hired, to come back to us probably in the next couple of weeks. They have committed, and I have committed to the board the first week in November to be able to present a final plan, recommendation, and future plans if needed. It's a daily basis work study group. Craft building, good news on that today. Debbie sent out an update. I asked her for where we stood. If you're here during the day, you can see the building. It's coming along nicely. Projected finish is December. Again, also, as of now, on track. Debbie's monitoring the payments, and I got to be honest with you, it looks good to me. Golf course, John Malinowski, a little bit about that. The golf course, the numbers, and you'll see when I talk about the numbers. Despite all the change down there, the golf course, the financials are basically on track with the budget. A key performance indicator, the green fees are up. So the golf course is trending favorable, even with the construction going on. Bulkheads, dredging, and drainage. Colby, she presented last board meeting. She's constantly updating that analysis that she has, along with Eddie and Nobi. And as she mentioned, that will be part of the budget process, since it's not just for the current year, with spend to date, forecasted spend, as well as what's projected for the next year. So already, a lot of the items are in place for the budget process. Staging area. I sent a contract as committed, and I've spoken to some in the media that have been asking me about it. We haven't had our own staging area since we shut down at the Swim and Racket Club. I sent a contract that's signed by another party for a staging area, a commercial area, that I've sent to the board, and I'm just waiting for a board approval on it, but I have a signed contract for a staging area. The staging area will help us save money as far as on the bulkhead, and that's all part of the analysis that I've sent to the board over the last couple of weeks. RFP accounting firm, we have a template in place. We have some time on it. Steve and I will be working on that over the next couple weeks. I will contact our current auditors to let them know as a courtesy what we are about to pursue. The budget, as I mentioned, and we'll continue to mention, the budget is in progress. It's coming along nicely. All the departments are already working on it. I had the police department in today going through the budget, as well as golf and a couple others. Kobe's already been in with capital. She's monitoring that with all the department heads. So we will be able to have something in place over the next couple weeks. Video, audio, the board meetings, Josh Davis. So, to be honest with you, I was embarrassed at the last one. We had a meeting the next day, Josh, me, and a few others. Josh, we have some ideas. Josh has already implemented them. I think the video quality and the audio will be way better than what you've seen in the past, and we're pursuing other initiatives to improve the sound in this room and to also try to get the boardroom back at the administration building. Okay, that's it.
John, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the operations report. Steve Phillips.
All right, this is Jug, this one's me. Oh, I didn't have the row, I'm sorry. So it's operating, Doug. This is me, and I guess then Steve. Yeah, it's financial report. Okay.
Oh, on the agenda, it's operations report, but certainly a report on the financials.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I don't know what happened there. Okay, well, I'll do the finance report, and then I'm sure his will be next. Okay, so let me just see what's up there. Okay, so, this is pretty much laid out each month. So let's go through the numbers for August. Revenues were over budget for the month, 105,000, rounded 106. Expenses over budget, 46,000. Net operating favorable for the month, $151,000. Turn the page. Let's look at the 4 months, the year-to-date numbers. Revenues over budget, $412,000. Expenses under budget, $48,000. Now, normally in the past, when we've had revenues over budget, our expenses have increased to support those revenues. This time, both are favorable, and I'll get into more detail in the next couple of slides.
John, excuse me, the $46,000, what is the major contributing factor to that being, if you know, and I mean to put you on the spot, what's the major contributing factor to the expenses being under budget?
That's for the month or year-to-date? Those are year-to-date. Yeah, but she wants the... Okay, so let me just do the next slide has all that detail on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I'll definitely answer it. All right, so let's go back here. So for the 4 months, the year-to-date, the revenue's $412,000. Hold on, what's up there? Okay, yeah, let's go back there. Revenues over budget for the 4 months, $412,000. Expenses under budget, $48,000. Net, $460,000. I want to talk about, and somebody typed it in, but I want to talk about two situations here. One, as I mentioned, expenses were under budget even though we had higher revenues, and we'll get into that on the next slide. To give you a comparison to last year, and obviously my numbers there are compared to budget, and that's how we report. If I look at last year for the month, we were favorable by $138,000 for the month of August, and then year-to-date, we were favorable $69,000 last year. Where are we today for 4 months? $460,000. All right, next slide. So the next slide is basically, it's showing that where we were favorable and where we were offset by unfavorable, and then the next slide ties it all together. So we were favorable in areas for $506,000, offset by some unfavorable variance of $46,000, and there's the $460. Let's go to the next slide that ties it all together. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so here if you go down, I'm going to work backwards to answer Camilla's. The $46,000 you see on the bottom where we were unfavorable was mostly aquatics, public relations, which I have explained in prior meetings, and we are working on that, and over time it'll balance out. You had some tennis and the CPI to $6,000. The aquatics was unfavorable by $26,000. Combination of the coupon cards as well as the change in the beach park, and some of it's offset there. Let's go up to the favorable stuff, the good stuff. Yacht Club, favorable, $155,000 year-to-date. Beach parking, favorable, specifically parking, $38,000, kind of takes on some of the stuff that you saw with aquatics, right? We've talked about that. Rec and parks, expense variations, favorable, $58,000. Some is timing, but a lot of it is the scrubbing of the expenses, which every department is doing. They've been doing it since I've gotten there, and there's been savings. Public Works, it was more on timing, but there are some savings there, $37,000. There are some open positions. Beach Club, $46,000. Well, the weather was great this year, right? Golf operations, maintenance, well, the green fees, favorable, $36,000. General maintenance, timing, some of it was timing, but there's favorability there. Marinas, weather, Ron Fisher, how much was that one? $41,000, money in the bank. Finance, favorable, $24,000. The gentleman next to me is scrubbing his expenses. We've gone through it wherever we can. We're trying to save on the budget without affecting operations. The GM, $20,000 favorable. We've spoken about that. There's a hometown discount. Pickleball favorable. Other admin, $18,000. $506,000. Team effort across the board, every department head. Okay, any questions on that then? The 46, you got it? Great. Okay, headwinds to budget, a new slide. I brought it up last time. So, you know, with all this favorability and everything, I do want to show you to make sure that we do have headwinds on the budget. It was a situation with the savings. I talked about it last time. We still have it, but we're working on it. The golf course. When the GM was informed, told, instructed, whatever the term is, to cut 2.5% last year, somehow, some way, it made its way in the golf course, of course, and they cut out of the chemicals $30,000. I have to run a golf course. The minimum required chemicals still need to be utilized. I'm not going to jeopardize $1 million golf course because somebody decided to cut expenses at any cost. I have a headwind there. We're working on it. We've brought in an outside consultant to help us with that. If you don't know, we are shorthanded there. Because of medical reasons. All right? Compensation study, we all know about that. It was going to be $100,000. The team effort, we got it down to $51,000. It'll be somewhere around there. But what was in the budget was somewhere around $25,000, so we will make that up. Restrooms, Beach Club, approximately $5,000. Same with the Marina docks. We had to bring in some labor to ensure that certain situations were maintained properly. The restrooms, actually, that number 5,000, Kobe and her team brought it in way better than what we expected. That was something that should have been in the budget. I'm sorry. New capital. Let me just talk about this one a little bit. The policy change, not budget. So we changed our policy, a year or two ago, whatever, the board or the CFO, they changed the policy that instead of capitalizing anything over $2,000, we would capitalize anything over $5,000. That is the norm, and it has been the norm for corporations for years and years ago. However, this is a different operation, which is what I said when I was on BNF. $2,000 makes sense for what we do here. The situation, what I said during BNF and the whole BNF team was this: if we are going to change to a $5,000 limit, you're going to have more expenses that you in the current operating year than you did in the past. It needs to be budgeted for. What happened? It wasn't budgeted for last year, despite it being brought up that it should be. So it wasn't budgeted for. It's a headwind. That's fine. We will work on it. The Crabbing Pier, everybody knows about that. That was $22,500. Referendum or anything there, legal fees, I just put question marks. Bottom line is around $100,000. The legal fees, I just want to talk about that, and Steve and I went through it yesterday, and I know Doug is on it also. We are monitoring it. So far, it's actually, I'm going to look at my controller. So far, he's telling me we're good, but we are monitoring it. There are a lot of expenses that are coming in, but I just want to let everybody know that the controller Doug, myself, we are looking at it. So there's your headwinds, 100,000, but we believe we can cover most of it. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, John. Steve?
Okay, thank you, Doug. I'm going to touch on some more details of two of the initiatives that John highlighted in his GM report. So I wanted to give some of the highlights along with the future timeline of both the budget process and then Northstar. So I'll start off here with the budget process. First, the kickoff was this past month with the Budget and Finance Committee, or the BNF Committee, issuing the guidance that was presented to the Board of Directors. This pretty much outlines all the deliverables and the areas of focus that we're looking at for the budget. So this kicked the budget process off internally, triggered us within finance to put together templates, and we started a bottoms-up budget process. Major work has already taken place within finance, including significant interaction with the department heads, as well as the GM, all being actively engaged in the process already here in the first month. The first full draft in terms of timing, the operating requests are actually due at the end of this month, October. Then we have various follow-up drafts that are scheduled all the way through December. So early December pretty much is the culmination of the final draft making its way to finance. And then, of course, in finance, we have a lot of work that goes on as well that we will be doing, gathering, consolidating, putting together the schedules that have been requested by the BNF, and considering and evaluating adjustments. I've listed a lot of the areas up there. We're looking at inflationary costs, of course, savings opportunities. We need to consider depreciation adjustments, interest, reserve balances, utilities, just to name a few. I put up the compensation study. Of course, that's another key initiative that the GM highlighted. Of course, that's going to be hopefully concluded around the same time. We will factor in things related to the compensation study. We'll consolidate the full package of deliverables by the end of the year in preparation for the Budget and Finance meeting that we have scheduled right now for January 6th through the 8th. And then we'll have a work session with the board to follow that, which I don't believe has been scheduled yet. So next slide, please. Next slide, Michelle, please. Okay, so then I just wanted to get into Northstar. So we've gotten a crunch time here with the rollout of the Northstar software here at Ocean Pines. As we know, the contract was executed back in March, and we had an external project consultant that we hired back in March of 2019. In June of 2019, we had various employees who were actually able to access the Northstar software in our training environment. And then around that same time, we had the main project lead at Northstar come on site here at OPA. She was here for a week. She initiated a first phase of training that we called it with the key system users. Now, basically, the whole month of September, we had pretty much locked down up in the fire department on the second floor. We had this Northstar project lead along with our external consultant set up space over there, and they administered extensive training to all the system users. And I just wanted to give accolades to the employees. You know, change is always difficult, but they definitely, you know, there was a lot of hard work that occurred over there. You know, there was focus, all around positive attitude related to the training and implementation the past few weeks. All hands were definitely on deck, and I believe they'll remain so in the next few weeks to come. Also a testament to the leadership, you know, setting the tone for this, making sure that everybody knows here this is a major initiative and we may need to make this happen. So. Another sidebar, we ended up recording all these valuable sessions. Employees can watch them at their leisure as they're learning the system. And this brings us up to the current week, which we're calling pilot testing. The Northstar leads in-house as well, doing transactions. So she's doing transactions with some of my finance people, some of the people on the front line to put live transactions in the live database. And this will lead into next week, which is our official go live, slated for October 7th. And we'll just have admin, rec, sports core, public works as part of this initial phase 1 go live. Looking ahead, of course, we got more work to do then. We got the yacht club, food and beverage, which training we're going to have slated during their off month of January 2020 for an anticipated go live in February. And then a marina go live prior to their April 1st opening. Lastly, training at the beach club and the other pools in late April, of course, in advance of the Memorial Day weekend. So lots of work completed here, lots more to follow. More importantly, many efficiencies and enhanced controls to look forward to here with the new system. And as John already mentioned, you know, on a positive note, project budget's on track to date. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Steve.
Hey, Doug.
Any question for
Josh,
Steve?
are we live online at all? Is there a reason why? All right. I mean, can we get it set by next meeting that we'll be live online? I mean, I have people texting me going, I can't watch the meeting. We're trying to, I mean, it's just kind of, it's been a month since the last debacle. I just like to try and get it live
Yeah,
as soon as we can.
And I'm getting the same text.
I know. I mean,
numerous.
I'm sure you are, but
It was discussed, I believe even the board agreed that it was going to be delayed. Everybody said that there shouldn't be a problem with it. That was discussed, unless I'm missing something here. If the board feels that we need to change, but it was agreed that it was okay to have a delay of a couple hours. I can tell you this, we have looked at the video and the audio. It is excellent what Josh is doing. But the understanding was that it was going to be a delay of a couple hours. I understand somebody, because I'm getting the text like crazy. If you all want that, we'll address it. But nothing here tonight is a miscue. This is what was planned.
oh, well, I mean, I didn't know. I had no idea. I mean, I
Sorry,
don't
this was
know what
discussed.
board knew, but I didn't, and I thought we had
This was all
30 days since
discussed.
the last one, getting it live is a priority, because there are people that are watching it trying to keep up with what's going on time, so,
If that's,
and that's
All right,
true too.
let's get back. So point taken.
Thank you.
John, we need to follow up accordingly.
yeah, we'll make it live.
Let's stay coordinated.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on. So the next item on the agenda is the treasurer's report. Larry Perrone.
And from Steve's report, you can see, as Doug mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, that over the next month or so, there may be, maybe not, a delay of our getting our financial results out in 15 or 13 days, because these guys are going through a lot of stuff right now. So, again, you know, as the treasurer, my responsibility is financial oversight. The financial information, I'm working with the GM and the finance lead. We're looking at the monthly bank reconciliations, cash, short-term investments, large disbursements, and our reserves. And most importantly, going forward now, our reserve forecast through the end of the year. The numbers we're going to talk about were basically presented at our last board meeting, because again, it's October 2nd, so we still don't have the September books closed. But in regard to the activities, last month, our short-term cash and short-term investments, we have overall our laddered investment rate through August was 2.5%. August 31st, the association had approximately $15.9 million in reserve. Approximately $4.8 million invested in CDARS that, as we've mentioned several times, is fully insured by the FDIC. And we have approximately $11.1 million of the money in money markets earning 2%, and our other operating accounts, which are fully insured. 11.1 million. Yes. Yes. I'm sorry, it's excess insured. Not collateral, it's excess insured. It's excess
Excess.
insured. The CDARs are FDIC insured.
The 11 million is not unsecured then.
It,
It has free excess deposit insurance, and it's collateralized. The CDAR is divided amongst various banks, which is FDIC insured.
Wherever this money's domiciled, they will have treasury securities that they could use to collateralize $11.1 million. Repo agreements, whatever they may be. I mean, that's the way we operated in the past, I thought.
I mean,
and the
it
money is
insured.
shared, Jack. It is shared through, and we're basically talking about our money with Union Bank that we had shifted to them. And that money is shifted through, I don't know, it was almost 50 other banks throughout the country. So the money it's covered. We wouldn't have, when we went to this, that was one of our major questions, that money was insured and we didn't have to be concerned about it. Okay? And again, what that did for us is we didn't have to break the investments up in smaller amounts for the CDARs, because, it's a large number. Okay, as of August 2019, our replacement reserve balance was at $6.3 million. Our bulkheads were $2.7 million, roads at $1.3 million. A total was $10.3 million. Now, next slide, please. This slide now becomes very important. As John reported earlier, we are now in the process of the 4 major projects we have going underway. And we sat with Steve and John to make sure that from a liquidity standpoint, we're in good shape, which we are. So you can see the expenditures that will be coming due between now and the end of the fiscal year are on the replacement reserves. On April 30th, 19, we had about $5.2 million, 1.9 additional added to it. Our expenditures, we're projecting $4.286 million this year to cover all our projects. It should leave us a balance in April 30th, 2020 of about $2.9 million. So again, with the money we're spending this year, we wanted to make sure 2 things: that we had the liquidity to cover the expenses, and secondly, that we didn't drain our replacement reserves to a point where if something unforeseen happened, we didn't have money to cover it. On the bulkheads and waterways, again, April 30th, we had almost $2.5 million. We added $720,000. The expenditures planned for this year, $1.95, and we're projecting a ending balance of $1.2. Roads, $1.1 million, additions of $350,000, and we're anticipating a spend of $836, which will leave us with $615,000. And again, the roads, I think the roads, Colby laid out our road plan and our bulkhead and drainage plans at the last meeting, so there is a set plan as to what properties are going to be dealt with on the bulkheads and what streets we're looking at repairing. Our total projection for year-end 2020, again, we started April of 2019 at $8.8 million, and again, with all the spend we're looking at this year, we're projecting a year-end balance 2020 of $4.8 million. Again, I want to emphasize again that this slide's very important because we are watching what we're spending. We want to make sure that the association, from a financial standpoint, remains healthy. And I think this, if the plans go accordingly, and we don't have any reason to expect they won't, we should still be in good shape at the end of this fiscal year.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comments. As with tradition, please say your name and address, and the topics are limited to 5 minutes, so the floor is now open for public comments, and the microphone is over here.
Better?
Good.
Get close to it.
Can you hear me? Okay. Gary Miller, 15 Windward Court, Ocean Pines. I'm here to talk just for a minute about the Atlantic General Hospital Penguin Swim. With Colby's help, Ocean Pines is forming a team to participate in this fundraiser. Atlantic General holds an event on New Year's Day every year, and the format is that we try to get organizations to form teams to raise money for the hospital. We tried to do something last year with Ocean Pines. It didn't really get started early enough, so we've got flyers out. The idea is that each person on the team gets friends, family, whatever, to donate in their name to go jump in the ocean on New Year's Day. Now, just so everybody doesn't get freaked out, you don't have to jump all the way in. You just have to get your feet wet. But it's for a great cause. Atlantic General is a nonprofit hospital. This is one of the big fundraisers that they use to help be able to fund ongoing projects and improvements of the hospital. So just want to let everybody know, if anybody's interested in joining the team, contact me or Colby. Colby's always at the Penguin Swim. She's the announcer person and kind of coordinates everything on the beach. So hope we can get some members to join the team, and if anybody has any questions, like I said, talk to me or Colby. Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. Thank you for doing this. I think it's a very important initiative, and I, for one, will be doing it with you on New Year's Day.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Sir.
I'm Dick Nemeth, and I'm at 45 Wood Duck Drive. I sent each of you, and including the general manager, a letter today. Unfortunately, I have to do a lot of speculation because the subject being the beach club parking pool passes, the remaining balances. I don't know the size of the problem. I don't know what you all are trying to fix. I have some concerns about what that is because I don't know. I don't know if there's $500,000 outstanding that you want to write off or if there's $5,000. I don't know if it's material or not. Some of that's mine. Don't have a big pool in it, and I can get rid of mine, just so you know. But I guess I'm concerned. It seems like I entertained this subject back, and I heard a gentleman really fussing about, it must have been May or something's meeting. It was upstairs at the yacht club. I don't think it's any clearer now in my mind than it was then. I'm concerned about the trust factor here as far as the homeowners are concerned and whether or not it's going to affect your revenues next year as far as beach club parking. I mean, one of your people, I've written it here, I'm going to let you read most of that. I just think that the amount of the write-off of what you're trying to do could definitely have an impact, could have publicity, could have things against us right now, and I don't understand what we're doing. I've made 3 recommendations on there. If you'll look at them, I appreciate it. John and Steve have both been gracious enough to invite me over tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Hopefully, a lot of my concerns that are on that piece that I sent to you will be answered by them. If not, I'll be back.
So first of all, let me, no, hold on. Let me.
They want to write off the balances of the parking passes, pool money. Well, I have a parking pass. You pay a certain amount for the pass, and they throw in more money on a debit card. Yeah, whatever you want to call it. But there's basically people have some of them have hundreds of dollars sitting out there waiting for their grandkids to show up to go to the pool, okay?
First of all, I also want to thank you for providing that detailed information that you sent us earlier today.
Yeah.
It was very, very helpful from a different perspective. And again, John, thank you for reaching out
9
to
o'clock
Dick.
tomorrow.
And at 9 o'clock tomorrow, so you'll get the answers to your questions, and
Yep.
hopefully we'll have a much clearer picture of where we're
Absolutely.
going. So I do thank you for that comment and the
Yeah.
information you
I'd like to
provided.
tell you where I'm driven from. I was a member of the Maryland Saltwater Sport Fishing Association, and you guys are way ahead of that, okay? But I recognize the problem in 2015 and 2018. The gentleman that was running the organization took somewhere between $500,000, $750,000, and nobody even recognized there was a problem until 3 years later. Thank you very much.
Again, thank you. Other public comments?
Okay, well, I've always been through a flawed guy. I've been here speaking the last couple months. Kobe was there, John was there. Okay, some people was there. I got a problem with that next door person. I've been 28 years here. He's renting that house out. This is a mess, people. You don't have to go to Africa to see a jungle. Go there. You see a jungle. I feel sorry they're living some African-American people in. No central air condition. The sun cannot hit the house. Yeah, and the sun cannot hit the house. And sometimes I speak to the people and I can smell the dampness in the house. And it's like I say, John was there, Kobe was there. I offer the people a dehumidifier they suck the dampness out of the house. Unfortunately, they want not to have it. But I ask you people to go and look and let the lawyer write him a letter. His trees are running over my house. And you have to remember, when it rains, there's a lot of water. Them trees are 30, 40 feet high and spray out over my house.
Judge, what address is this? I'm sorry.
What you said, the address is 14 Lord Guys, my next neighbor.
All right, thank
It's
you.
not the people who live in, but for what I don't understand, this guy has 7 houses. For what I heard, I cannot say it is true. But, you know, if we get a storm 50, 60 miles and that rain, there's the swamp, that tree is going to fall on my house, not 1, 2, 3, 4. And Kobe was there, John was there, they do the best. But you people, I ask you people to look it good over and send that person a letter. He's a doctor. He does nothing. He just asks the people $1,000 a month. I ask you people for help. And let the lawyer write him a tough letter that he start cleaning that place up. I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, would you like to touch on
Yeah,
that? Did you
so
get
first
the
of all-
address of that property, by the way?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, Michelle has it.
Yeah, John knows what it
Okay.
is.
So Doug, as you know, and we've reported in, I think last month or the month before, we have made changes. We've made changes with council, local council. Kobe's already on it. Eddie, we are talking to the new council, and I'm hoping that we can get this thing resolved.
Okay.
Okay. But we did make some changes. Let's see. Just give me some time with it.
So, thank you, and the GM's been informed, so you have an answer. Other public comments?
Yeah, Joe Reynolds, 84 Watertown Road. The numbers that John presented, 460,000 versus 69,000 positive compared to last year, astronomically good. This board of directors, especially staff, more especially our new general manager, got a lot to cheer about, believe me. From the money side and the management side, this is fantastic news. Keep it up. John, you mentioned about a staging area. Where is this staging area going to be?
The stage, I'm sorry. They haven't.
Long to ask.
Wait, I can't. I'm sorry.
There's,
Should I wait?
yeah. Well, it'll be answered tomorrow.
Let me just, well, first of all, assuming the board approves this, the staging area is not on Ocean Pines soil.
Thank you.
Yeah. If
That's what the board voted on some years ago, that would not be on Ocean Pine, so. I wasn't going to ask about this, but I will, because my friend Marty Clark has been texting me, and he says it's impossible that we have $11 million in a non-FDIC insured money market account. Is he correct?
Screen. As I mentioned, it is insured.
Is
It
it
is not a
insured
CDAR.
FDIC?
It is not a CDAR.
Okay. It's not FDIC insured. Okay. So it's not insured by the United States government. Completely different issue. Colette, I believe you mentioned, and I'm not sure I understood what you said. I believe you said that there was a 6-to-1 vote by email to approve a lease with secrets. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If that is correct, then we don't have a contract with secrets because all email, non-meeting actions taken by this board of directors must be unanimous. A 6-to-1 vote in an email vote is illegal, not only under our bylaws, but under Maryland corporate law. We've been through this before. We keep plowing the same ground over and over. I'm not sure what board member objected, but we don't have a contract with secrets.
We need the 7-0 to go to an electronic vote, which we did have. We had a 6-to-1 on the motion itself.
In a meeting,
In an email vote. An
that's
email
not
vote.
legal. I believe you better check with your lawyer.
We'll
Believe me.
double check, but to back up what Colette says, that process is a two-step process.
So-
The first process is to agree to take the vote
Okay.
via email. That's 7-0. That's a requirement. It must be unanimous.
Okay.
Right? And then the second process is to actually submit the motion for discussion and a final vote.
I'm not going to argue legal issues with you, but I will only say this. We've been through this at least 4 times in the past 25 years or so. Every time the board of directors makes the same mistake, the law requires that the action taken be unanimous, and if you ask your lawyer, he'll tell you that. So please do so.
Joe, in fairness, I will get an answer for you and follow up.
Okay. One more item on the legal fees for DRs. I believe Mr. Daly is going to propose a motion that would look into a change in the declarations of restrictions that would allow the board of directors to do something they cannot currently do, and that is a change in the DRs that would say if the board of directors takes, say, an association member to court on a DR violation, that the person taken to court would be liable for OPA's legal fees. I don't have any objection to that in principle. Frankly, it doesn't amount to much because despite talk by the board in the newspapers about $25,000 to $50,000 costs related to collecting fees, I spoke to one of the attorneys that was collecting fees for us, and they were charging $550 to file down at the county. And if my information is correct, no one ever challenged those charges, and OPA won every case. So there was no big money involved here. However, again, I have no objection to a DR that changes to allow OPA to collect legal fees if OPA goes to court. Here's my question. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If OPA decides to sue an association member in court for a DR violation, I submit that any DR change should provide reciprocal protection for the member, so that if the OPA sues the member in court and the member wins, OPA should pay the member's legal fees.
Joe, I'm sorry. Let me interrupt you, because I am a lawyer. The determination of the assignment of legal fees is a matter for the court and not a matter for the individual litigants. One litigant can ask for attorney's fees, and one litigant can say, no, I don't want to pay those attorney's fees, and that becomes a matter of judicial discretion, and that is up to the judge. it is not as easy as you might portray. It is not to say that because an OPA member sues us for legal fees that they're going to be granted, nor is the converse of that true. And so I don't want to, as a lawyer, I don't want to leave you with any kind of supposition that just because you want it doesn't make it so.
With all due respect, I believe that you're not looking at the issue properly. Currently, the board, any court has the option, if you ask, to give legal fees. What we're looking for is a declaration of restrictions change that will allow the Ocean Pines Association itself, outside the court, to bill the member for legal fees and charge it to that member as we charge an assessment. Is that what you're looking for, Frank?
Well, just to be clear, we have asked current counsel and past counsel if we can collect the legal fees, ask the court for legal fees when we go for non-collection items.
Right.
Both current counsel and past counsel agree that the absence of those words in our declarations of restrictions preclude us from requesting that.
Right.
That's why we're putting it in there. And counsel also, like counsel next to me, basically has said, keep in our own lane. We would be best off not to tell the court what to do just in case something goes a different way.
Absolutely.
Well, there are associations in the state of Maryland that have a provision within their declarations of restrictions that allow the association to collect the legal fees from the membership.
All right. Guys, I'm going to limit to one more comment, and we got to move on. We have exceeded the 5
All I'm
minutes.
saying
Joe,
is-
one more comment, make it 30 seconds.
Talk to your attorney about it before you go passing anything. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Other public comments?
Good evening. Jack Collins, 66 Skyline Court. Hi, guys. As a past member of the board, I too want to compliment the administration that has been put together by this board over the last, I guess, 18 months. Fantastic report, and it evolves each and every month and becomes better each and every month. I wasn't trying to be a nibbish and get into your business, but if you're dealing with a large institution, large financial institution, they do have short-term securities, and they're treasury bills. And they can use those treasury instruments as collateral against your $11.1 million to evolve those funds into the various CDs or what have you. In the past, what we were doing is we were receiving federal agency stock, which happened to be Farmers Home Loan, something or other. And we decided back then that that was not a good program. So I just point that out to you as a point of information.
Jack, and as I said, not to interrupt you, but as I said, that's not how this is being insured. And the money is being shared with, that allows for it to be insured.
Perfect. Because you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
You just don't. I rise in opposition to a motion that's going to be put before this board at the end of the evening, I guess, concerning the control of rental units in our neighborhoods.
Jack, point of
I
order.
think
That motion was stricken from tonight's agenda. We're waiting for.
Then I withdraw any future comments that I would make about that particular issue.
And again,
And
going back
I will
to the-
sit down right
I'm not
now.
asking you to sit down. No, but that's the hearing will be on the 15th, and then we'll probably follow up accordingly.
Thanks, Jack.
But thank you, Jack. Other public comments? Seeing none, I'll close the floor for public comments. Move on to our next agenda item, and that is capital purchase requests. We have none slated for this month, so we'll move into the next item on the agenda. That's CPI violations. John?
Okay, so the first one, 34 Bridgewater Road, violation, debris and high grass. Recommendation, sent to OPA attorney for action.
I'll entertain a motion to find 34 Bridgewater Road in continuing violation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just one. Note, from the time of the initial inspection to the time the board has taken any kind of action to clear it with the attorney is 14 weeks.
Higher now. There's also debris on the thing, and parked vehicles in the lot.
All right, look, guys, let me say, while I took a very flexible approach to public comments, when we make comments on the board, please be recognized by the chair before we make comments. So, any other comments on this particular item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of finding 34 Bridgewater Road in continuing violation, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? John, next one.
Yep. 8 Juneway Lane, violation, maintenance, high grass weeds, unregistered vehicle.
I'll entertain a motion to find 8 Juneway Lane in continuing violation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Same discussion, 14 weeks.
Noted. Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of finding 8 Juneway Lane in continuing violation, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. John, next one, please.
Okay, might have a typo up there, but it's 28 Bird Nest Drive. Violation, maintenance, and debris. Recommendation, sent to OPA attorney for action.
I'll entertain a motion to find 28 Bird Nest Drive in continuing violation.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion.
13 weeks.
Noted. Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of finding 28 Bird's Nest Drive in continuing violation, please say aye.
Am I missing
Aye.
one over
Aye.
there?
Any
I'm
opposed?
missing 42
Thank you.
Brandlewood.
Next item.
Michelle, I'm missing 42 Brandlewood. Okay, I'm going to skip one. I'm going to go to 44 Brandywine Drive, violation, debris, sent to OPA attorney for action.
Entertain a motion to find 44 Brandywine Drive in continuing violation.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion.
11 weeks.
Getting better. Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of finding 44 Brandywine Drive in continuing violation, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next item, John.
Okay, so let's go back. 42 Brandlewood Drive, violation, maintenance, debris. Recommendation, sent to OPA attorney for action.
I'll entertain a motion to find 42 Bramblewood Drive in continuing violation.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion.
13 weeks.
Noted. Other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of finding 42 Bramblewood Drive in continuing violation, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? John, next item, please.
Okay, so last one, 58 Seafarer Lane, violation, maintenance. Recommendation, sent to OPA attorney.
I'll entertain a motion to find 58 Seafarer Lane in continuing violation.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion.
14 weeks.
I have a question. If this has anybody gone out to this property and talked to these people? I mean, they've signed all the letters that have been sent certified mail. Have we actually gone out and spoke to them and seen if we could help them out with this? I mean, it's just a matter of cleaning the gutters
Right.
and cutting the grass. They've signed every letter. They're up to date on their assessments. Is there an opportunity for somebody from CPI to actually knock on the door and see what's going on, if there's somebody needs some help, or if we could assist them, or I don't know. I'm just asking.
Before we move forward, I'll ask we suspend Robert's rules and allow someone to answer the question.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Robert's rules are considered suspended right now.
Kobe?
Please, microphone, please.
To answer your question, when we get something in that we can go and contact the homeowner on, that we try and do that. Maintenance issues, if they don't address it, we are not allowed to go on the property to take care of the issue unless we have a court order to do so. So until that changes. That's why we can't just go on and cut the grass and whatnot.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, and I don't mean go on and do it, but has somebody actually got on the phone and talked? Because obviously they're somewhere, because they're picking up the mail. They're not behind in us. It's unlike a lot of them where they're behind in assessments and you know they probably don't care. But these, at least they're current, they've paid, they've answered every certified mail in there. So it's just, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's just, has anybody grabbed a phone number and called?
Tom, I'm going to jump in and help out. First of all, Kobe, thank you for coming tonight and helping out. So there is an initial inspection, I do believe, that, now I wasn't there on all of these or whatever. There is an initial inspection. There are letters sent. This has been going on. This is the way it's been approached for years, Tom. That's why what Frank is bringing forward, I believe, will definitely help. I do understand. I've been on some of these where our guys will not go on the property. I can't blame them. Even the police say that we shouldn't go on there. But there is an initial inspection. I'm reading it right here. There are the letters. And that's why I think Frank's right to some degree on this thing, that we need to adjust accordingly. All right? But no, it's a good question, but
It's an individual basis situation.
there is an
but if you look at
inspection.
all of them, it's like, who cares? You know, they're not going to answer no matter what. This one in particular seems like these
Right.
people actually are around. Maybe they're just sick and they can't get down. I don't know. I mean, it seems to me, if you called a realtor, they could get their number in about a second and a half.
Well,
Just saying.
Other discussion while we had Robert's Rules suspended,
Thank-
Joe.
Kobe,
Thank
thank
Joe.
you.
Thank you, Colby. I'm sorry.
The Board of Directors should read the declarations of restrictions for Ocean Pines. I don't know the exact language, but it reads something like this. With a 2/3 vote of the Ocean Pines Board of Directors, 4/5, whatever it is, more than a more normal majority, this Board of Directors can vote to go onto a property without going to court. You can't remove personal property. You can go onto that property without going to court, cut the grass. As a matter of fact, if you talk to Joe Moore, our prior attorney, you'll find that one of the homes, when you go into the golf course, make a left turn off the parkway, right, depending on which way you're going. OPA went in there, put a new roof on the place, new siding, put down sod, redid the entire driveway, and sent the guy a bill. We have the authority, the guidelines give the general manager fast-track authority. Frank's sitting there saying 12 weeks, 13 weeks, 15 weeks. The general manager has the board authority to bring these problems to the board immediately. There's no reason to have these things for 13 weeks. Do what you have the authority to do and don't keep putting it off. We go through this year after year. Thank you.
Point taken. All right, seeing any other discussion, I'd like to reinstate Robert's Rules of Order. Any opposed? Any opposed to that? All right, consider Robert's Rules reinstated. Any other discussion on the finding 58C fair and continuing violation? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of finding 58C Fair Lane and continuing violation, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That concludes the CPI violations. We'll move into the next item of business, which is unfinished business, which we have none from the previous meeting. So we'll move into new business. First, there's a motion on the floor by myself. I'd like to move to rename the Marlin Room in the Community Center to the Anna Foltz Room. Purpose and effect, the name change will memorialize Anna Foltz and recognize her for the contribution she has made to our community. The background is Anna Foltz's contributions and volunteer spirit that she demonstrated should be recognized, and the name dedication of the meeting room will serve that purpose. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Good. Seeing none. Seeing none. I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I dare say anybody opposed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'll be nice. And then that's in conjunction with what I mentioned earlier about the dedication ceremony from Star Charities on the 24th at 3 p.m., Josh, right? So and more details on that to follow. Thank you. Next item on the agenda was a motion for asking the Worcester County Commissioners to lay a vote on Bill 19.3, which was stricken based on our changing or amending the agenda for tonight. So the next item on the agenda was discussion to replace with the marquee information signs. Colette.
Yes, the topic is replacement of the 13 marquee information signs within our community with 2 electronic signs, one at the north gate and one at the south gate. Concise statement, the Communications Advisory Committee, in consultation with the OPA Director of Marketing and Public Relations, is recommending replacement of the marquee information signs located along Ocean Parkway, on Manklin Creek Road near the Racket Sports Complex, and on Cathell Road near the Sports Corps Pool with 2 electronic signs. The purpose is to promote easier maintenance of the information they provide. Although this action falls within the responsibility of the GM, the purpose of this discussion is to present the concept to the board and to the membership, to solicit input on the topic, to assess the value of doing further research on options for replacement signs, and to determine the value of including the cost in the upcoming budget. Background. Although the marquee signs are presently in good repair, the maintenance of the information on the signs presents challenges to OPA staff. Presently, 4 different departments are responsible for keeping the information current at a cost of total of approximately 1 staff day per week. In addition, when situations occur that result in last-minute cancellation of weekend or holiday events, the person responsible for changing the information must gain access to the necessary materials on the weekend, which sometimes is difficult. Finally, the process of changing the information poses risk of injury to the staff member due to the weight of the glass covering that must be raised and propped up by a 2x4 board while the letters are put in place. The proposal is to replace the 13 signs with 2 electronic signs at a cost of approximately $40,000 each. The benefits include the ability to maintain the accuracy and timeliness of the information electronically from the marketing department office or remotely any day, anytime. The challenges to this proposal include concerns about light pollution after dark and the cost. Further research is needed to determine options to address these issues. I'm going to just cut this short. Additional challenges come from Worcester County permitting and zoning issues. Current Worcester County Code restricts message signs only to the identification of the community or geographic region. Furthermore, there are no variances or exceptions that can be obtained. Although OPA signs presently go beyond this to provide information about programs and activities, according to Jennifer Keener, Worcester County zoning administrator, the county has never pressed the issue of removing what has been in existence. Additionally, she indicates that she could not permit new or replacement signs. Advice from Ed Tudor, the Worcester County Director of Permitting, is that a text amendment to a county code could accomplish the objective of replacing our current signs with something new, such as electronic signs. The text amendment could be approved if the wording limits the change to a community with specific characteristics, such as number of homes, such that it does not impact the entire county. This discussion topic is presented in order to determine board and homeowner support for pursuing this concept and going to the work of overcoming the zoning and permitting problems.
All right, seeing this is a discussion item, I will open the floor for discussion.
I would like to,
Camille.
thank you. I would just like to say that I think that the signs that we have on the Parkway and in other places are very quaint, and they are almost nostalgic, but I really do support the continuing investigation of this discussion. I think that sometimes we do have experiences where changes in plans need to be made expeditiously rather than having someone with the appropriate lettering materials go out and change the signs in some sort of timely format. So I would really encourage us to continue to explore this, to look at the cost-benefit analysis, and to consider the purchase of these signs, barring any restrictions by any codes that are imposed on us by Worcester County or our own restrictions or bylaws.
Yeah, I have a comment. So with regard to the costs, I'm very much interested in that. I think the estimates right now are 80 grand. So how long does it take us to recoup that investment? Because again, you're measuring labor hours, for not only carrying out things, but actually keeping it up to date, versus an investment of 80K that should, when are we going to see the return on that investment? Where's the break-even point? And then the second part of it is, what other costs will we have to incur to actually change from a manual sign to an electronic sign? Well, obviously, you have to need to go to dare I say, Comcast, or some other service provider to get information so we're connected from a homing point, in which case is probably administration building, out to the signs in order to do that. So there's a couple of more costs involved in that. And I think it's very important that we understand the entire cost and then the return on that investment. When is it going to pay it back? And is it, quite frankly, is it worth it? I'm not poo-pooing it. I'm just saying, if you tell me it's going to be 27 years before we can pay back the labor costs, I'm not really sure that, I can sort of propose a value set associated with that. But if it's something along the lines of, I freed up X amount of hours worth of labor and I can apply it against, deficiency in the labor area in another part of the operation, okay, then maybe we can look at that. But that's one of my, I don't call it concern, just something that I'd like to get at least a little more information on. So, other comments? I think Larry, please.
Yeah, first off, for this issue, I'm not so sure a cost-benefit analysis is the appropriate thing to deal with here. This is really something that adds to the quality of life in Ocean Pine. So, yeah, whether there's a real cost-benefit besides the service provided to the community, I'm not so sure. From a financial standpoint, if that's really the issue. But my concern is that I know this issue was addressed, it's probably 4 years ago. I can remember Marty Clark making a big issue about this, and the county was intransient on making the changes. I think it's probably a good thing if we could get the signs, but until the codes are changed, I mean, we're just spinning our wheels. So if the discussion here is to put a group together, to have our general manager put a group together with our attorney to try to influence the county, I think that's a good thing. But at this point, until that happens, I don't think there's anything we can do.
Other comments? Frank, you're next.
All good comments, something to explore, but I think there's a couple practical things. If you're not going to look at a cost-benefit analysis, then the argument becomes it's a safety issue because you can get messages out to the community faster in a critical situation. In that case, you need 3 signs, not 2, because St. Martin's Neck Road also has to be covered. And the likelihood of, I'll just say it, a possibility that road may be more heavily traveled in the future, particularly if at some point in the distant future, a traffic circle is put at the North Gate. So there's 3 signs, not 2.
Excuse me, parliamentary procedure, discussion remains up here, Robert's Rules of Order are in place.
So
continue, Frank.
Multiple signs. The other thing, and it's agreed, if the county says no, the answer, and they're not going to move, then we'd be wasting our time and effort. And the other question, just issue that pops out immediately is, I have a pretty good gut level feel that the replacement reserve for our manual signs is nowhere near $80,000.
All right, other comments? Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I like the little quaint signs throughout the parkway as well. My question would be, and as far as a cost-benefit analysis, I mean, what it would do would be used to bring people into our community and bring them into the yacht club. When we did, in the environmental committee, when we decided we were going to put roofs over top of all the mailboxes, first thing we did was went out, figured out how much it was going to cost to build a building over top of it with a roof and with a light. So without knowing whether this is really $40,000, how big it is, I don't know if it's a 10 by 10 electric sign or a 40 by 40 billboard on each side of Ocean Pines. I mean, I really have no idea. So maybe a little bit more information so we truly know with a picture of the sign and where it would go and where you'd set it and a total amount exactly of what the cost of the sign, because there's always going to be the extra cost of hooking it up and electric on it as well. And I would just need to see all that before I could even think about saying yes or no. So,
Colette?
Did you want to say something first?
I did, but you can go first if you want.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. I have a couple questions or concerns, I guess. I do think it's a lot of money. I also have a concern about who's going to do it. If we're going to add more work onto our staff, because in my experience over the last couple of months being pretty involved in a lot of things around here, our staff are worked pretty heavily right now, and I'm not sure that getting them involved and going to the county and trying to work on a permit is worthwhile. Another point, I was the contact person for a lot of the Rotary, and I checked on something today. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration of the U.S. Department of Transportation says, any distraction over 2 seconds is a potential cause of crashes or near crashes. I've stopped when I've seen these big electronic billboards, and you start looking at the thing, and then all of a sudden, the guy behind you is blowing his horn. You know, I don't want people in our community stopping to read the sign as it's scrolling around and changing and all that, and causing accidents.
I have a response to that, but collect that.
I was just going to kind of bring the discussion to a close.
Yeah, good idea.
If we're ready.
Go ahead.
You know, basically, it sounds like we've got opinions on both sides on the board, but the board is not opposed to getting some more information about this to answer some of these concerns and to kind of take it to the next step to see how difficult or easy it may be to get that text revision with the county. I agree that we don't want to put an inordinate amount of staff time into this, but it's really the GM's call as to, you know, how he wants to allocate his resources to do the research that we need to really get all these questions answered.
So I recommend.
Excuse me,
I'm sorry.
need to be recognized by the chair.
Yes, sir.
Camille.
Thank you. Could I recommend that we put together some sort of short-term task force to investigate what it's going to need, what kind of man-hours it would take, what the cost-benefit analysis might be, and to bring a discussion back to the board at a meeting 3 months hence?
And the communications committee exists for that purpose.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Tom?
Yeah, I was going to say, the communications committee can put together all this information. That's what you guys meet together to do. You came up with the idea, so if they could do it without involving any of our staff and spending any staff dollars, that would be great. Get all the information, all the dollar figures, all where you're going to do it, and then bring that back to the board, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, let me emphatically state that that's one of the reasons why we have advisory committees. There's no reason to reach down into staff time in order to do things that an advisory committee is built and set up to do. So I would offer, in order to close discussion, anybody else has any other salient points, I'd like to say perhaps we refer this to the the communications committee, get their opinion, read them the text, and then let them review what we've talked about already, and pull together a meeting at some point, maybe, I don't know, we'll have 2 months, maybe, we'll see what happens, but let's let the communications.
This was originated by communications.
Let's
and
let the
they
communications
they
advisory
asked me to
committee
come to the board
make
to
a recommendation to
determine
us. All right,
there
seeing
was
no,
the will.
very good. Seeing no more discussion, we'll close the, that item on the agenda. The next item on the agenda has been modified from its original. It's now reading the first reading of M01. Frank.
Okay. Topic, first reading to amend Resolution M01. Attached is Resolution M01, and it's attached to your board packet, with proposed changes that in effect rescind the motion. It will be replaced with Resolution M-10. M-10 is also included in the board packet as a first reading. The effect of these changes is to implement a faster and more effective policy and procedure for addressing violations to the declarations of restrictions and architectural guidelines.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Okay.
Frank.
There's an extensive board packet with information for the board members, which I think is also out on the web and publicly available. But basically, to implement a procedure to, a policy and procedure for faster resolution to violations of our declarations of restrictions, there's 4 steps that have to be taken in lockstep. Rescind M01, a slight revision to M04, a revised resolution to C02, all takes care of the paperwork. Now, to cut to the chase on what this does compared to what happens today, during the violations, I was giving the timelines that takes for the board to act. The net effect of all these changes and the adoption of M010 is this. From the day that there is an initial violation noted to declaration of restrictions, the next day, the CPI department sends a letter that says you have 30 days to correct the violation or show substantial progress toward correcting that violation, or the general manager is authorized to go to court and get a court order forcing you to comply with the declaration of restriction. That's it in a nutshell. It doesn't change the fact that there's an architectural review meeting and a potential for a variance or a potential for the architectural review committee to listen to the violator and say this is not a violation. Doesn't change anything up to that point. But what it does is compresses the timeline instead of going around and around and around and around and around and around till you have 30 days to correct it.
Other discussion?
I'll just make a comment. I was with, as a liaison to the ARC committee, and they're very supportive of this change and feel like it's really helpful. I think the other thing that it's important to note that the GM has the authority then to go directly to get a court order.
And report to the board.
And report back to the board, but it does not come to the board for a decision.
Right.
So, Robert's rules are still in place. I have a comment. Number one, so Frank, I absolutely agree with this. It was more of a procedural question. Does it make more sense to modify M01, or does it make more sense to basically rescind M01 and add an, M10? And the question would be, should we involve the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee and get their opinion?
I actually have an opinion from them. And
Okay.
basically their opinion is you could do it either way.
Okay.
Now, their preference to be absolutely would be to say, go through and to modify M01. My preference is, I've done all the work on it. If they want to come back to us and say, look, because of something deep inside the bowels of the organization, how the little gears move, that it would be a lot better to take M01 and just incorporate M04 to it, and they want to do that, I would certainly accept that. But at this point, my thing to the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee is, we want to rescind M01 and replace it with M10. If you have a better way to do it and want to come back for the second reading with it, we will accept it.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, would you take the lead on that, and then if you can get the information back from the the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee, and then present that prior to the November meeting, where we'll have the second reading of this?
I could, but I actually think, Doug, that the way to approach it is, if, from my standpoint, okay, now, there may be something, again, in a little gear procedurally doesn't do it. They know that we want to rescind M01. They know that we want to incorporate M10. If they want to, for some odd reason, keep M01 in the books and incorporate what I have in M04, have at it, and I'll more than gladly accept it, if that's okay with the other 6 of you. And they can do that at the committee level rather than me do it at the board level and go back and forth.
So, seeing an important gentleman in the audience, I'd ask to rescind Robert's Rules of Order for a moment. Any questions? All those in favor of,
That's fine.
Yes, okay. Rescinding Robert's Rules of Order. Okay, Robert's Rules of Order are suspended. Jim, could you share some of your insight, please?
I'll stand here and speak. I'm chairman of the Bylaws and Resolutions Advisory Committee. The board has to bring this to us for us to consider. We're not going to sit here. I'm not going to sit here and listen to what you say and take it to the committee. Bring it formally to the committee.
Okay. So, all right, Robert's Rules of Order suspended. Joe, please. Please keep it short.
Yeah, I don't really think it's funny, to tell you the truth. I have grave concerns about this motion, Frank, to be perfectly honest with you. If you read the declarations of restrictions, it states that the board, in order to take an action, the board of directors has to declare a member in continuing violation. You're essentially giving that authority to the GM. I think it's a serious problem. This rush to make these changes via board resolutions, somebody needs to consider what the declarations of restrictions say. And again, I'll say it again, this board needs to read the declarations of restrictions. Thank you.
All right, I'll entertain one more question.
We have some people that aren't here all the time. They may not be here for 30 days. They may be sick. You don't know, they could be in a hospital. So how are you going to find that out? You don't want to find somebody that's on death's bed, you know, one of the hospitals, and that really looks bad for you folks.
Point taken. Point taken. Other comments?
Just to respond to that quickly, in meeting with the ARC committee, if an owner has a situation like that, they can come and talk with ARC or communicate by phone and ask for consideration. And I think the ARC committee is pretty willing to work with people if there's a situation like you described.
Okay, I'd like to reinstate Robert's Rules of Order. All right, consider it reinstated. Additional questions on the discussion?
Yeah, I just have one. I mean, I assumed when we were talking about this, that what we were doing was, in our initial meeting that we had with Jeremy over at the Beach Club, our initiation meeting, his big concern was that he couldn't, you know, you could go on for a year sending letters and trying to get people to take care of their things, and that's attorney's fees on an hourly basis, whatever our retainer may be. But he could never go after them for that money, even if they never fixed their property. And I assumed that's what we wanted to be able to do. I don't understand why we have to have our lawyers working for 6 to 8 months on trying to get people to fix their houses, but can't go after them to pay for our lawyers doing that. That's my point. That was what I thought this was all going to be about, not necessarily saying you got 30 days to do it or we're going to sue you. It was just a matter of, hey, if you don't do this, we can, because we can't now, it's not in our DRs, we are not allowed to go after for legal fees, the legal fees that we pay that are part of that big monster legal number, that lawyer's number that we had 2 years ago or a year ago. We can't go after them for those legal fees. And that's what I assumed this was going to be. Now, whether, I mean, I have to read through this another couple of times, but that's where I would agree to something like this, and that's where I thought we were going.
Frank?
Let's clarify and put this thing in perspective, which is also in the board package, and give the kind of what I call real look at how violations of DRs have handled, how the CPI department works and everything like that. First, the department gets up to 12 complaints a day, okay? Of the 12 complaints that they get, the vast majority of those complaints are rectified within 30 days. And in fact, not only are they rectified within 30 days, most of them are rectified over the phone without any formal documentation being given to anybody. So it's not like there's an enormous thing out there. So after, and by the way, in that 30-day period where you try to make contact with the owners, they have 2 opportunities to talk with the ARC because the ARC meets twice a month, okay? So, and there's reach out to the folks from the CPI group to try to talk with them in person and explain what's happening, okay? At the end of the 30 days, right now, or the end of the session, if we follow the current procedures, it then at some point comes to the board, okay? And a letter goes to the attorney, a letter sent from the attorney to the violator. There are further reduction in the violations at that point when people see the violation notice from the attorney. But at the end of the day, we sent, which is in the board packet, I think it was 17 cases, John, to the attorney, which is 0.002% of all the homes in Ocean Pines, okay? Now, there is a kind of urban legend, well, the problem is the people have been here for 40 years, they are on death's doorstep, they have no money, and we're beating on them to correct the violation. The truth of the matter is, when we dig into the ones, some of which have gone back to 2005, that simply isn't the case, okay? And if you want to go through some properties and why our current procedures don't work, let's talk about 3 of them. Number 4, Bramblewood, should ring a bell to Larry, to Doug, to you, Tom, and to me, because the first time we ran together, to get on the board. That was brought up by former Director Trendick as a big issue. It was a house with a blue tarp on the roof with thigh-high weeds. Go to that house today, it is unoccupied. You say, oh, why didn't our procedures work? Why didn't these fast, effective procedures that are in place work? Well, here's why they didn't work, okay? The heirs predeceased the owner. So we followed our procedures to the letter of the law, and we were sending letters in effect to dead people telling them to comply to our declarations of restrictions. Doesn't get too many results, okay? Take one that's more contemporary, 54 Bramblewood, okay? A case where assessments are up to date, the people have owned the property for years, it's going on for years. Somebody comes before the board and they're pleading, why do I have to deal with this year after year after year after year? Why don't you do something? So we dig in and find out, and here's some of the reasons why. Number one, okay, where I would say the procedures are about as cumbersome as you can get, the other fact of the matter, which is equally true, is there have been past general managers that have refused to follow them and implement them, okay? CPI has clearly indicated the times that they have gone to the GM for fast-track actions, and the GM has refused to follow up on it. An outright refusal to follow the procedures, okay? So that's part of it, okay? Then the third thing, and this is the poster child, we say, well, let's use the cumbersome procedures, and why don't we do them and get something done, which we've done. And we followed the procedure, we went through the attorneys, we've spent God knows how much money, and we got a court order, okay, to rectify a violation. So interestingly enough, I'm talking with a member of the media, and out of full disclosure, Tom, and Tom says, since you're on this little tirade about enforcing the DRs, maybe you want to check out this property because there's a violation there. And I didn't ring a bell, and I looked it up, and I said, oh, no, that can't be the case because we have a court order, okay? And they wouldn't violate a court order. So go check. It's a rare case where both parties are right, okay? I was correct in that I did not find a violation, which appeared to be a vehicle that was untagged. Tom was correct because I found what appeared to be 2 vehicles untagged, okay, after we had a court order. That has gone on since 2014, okay? Yeah, you know what? You're right, Joe. Our number one job is to protect homeowner value. And if we're not doing that, we're not doing our job. And that's exactly what these changes are designed to do. And here's the deal. You say won't do it, I say go to court. You know, if somebody wants to violate a court order, have at it. And let's have them pay. The other thing in the board packet, to be crystal clear to everybody in the room, our counsel has given us some advice on what this would cost. It's in writing in the board packet. We have given other counsel opportunities to challenge that. They have said, we think we can do it for less. Nobody has disputed the possibility of hitting the upper limits. That's why we want to be able to have the defense in the right language in our declarations to recoup our court costs. If somebody really does take us to the mat, and we have people that are, quite frankly, telling the ARC and telling the CPI department, we will now correct this violation when the Maryland Court of Appeals orders us to. So here's the deal. We either back down or we fight for the homeowner. And our job is to fight for the homeowners, plain and simple.
Other discussion? So I would like to mention the fact that we really do need to go back and make sure that we recommend or present this information back to the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee to kind of clear them out. I personally, and I don't know, I would certainly want to take a consensus here, but I personally would want to hear from them regarding how they would organize the number of resolutions that are associated with this process and incorporate things that are already in the DRs. So unless anybody, even though we can treat this as a first resolution, I believe, unless anybody has any problem with it, the follow-up would be, let's take this back to the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee. They're aware of these first readings and get a recommendation from them on how they would present it. Because, Frank, I think you talked about M04, you got C02, and then the creation of M10. And I certainly would rather have a recommendation from the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee, because your point is well taken with regard to some of the, we'll call it the inner workings of the minutia that's in the governance documents, and they're the best source to find out all of that information and be able to reference it accordingly. So unless anybody has a problem with that, I certainly declare this as a first reading with an action item of taking it back to the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee. Any problems with that?
I think procedurally, just to be sure, when we send the first reading to them, and maybe my expectations are not how the procedure works, we send a first reading to them. If they feel that there is something, I'll use the term in error, or something that can be done better in that first reading, they send that back to us, and we incorporate that in the second reading. And then we vote on that, and that becomes the resolution. Is my understanding of that process correct?
To answer your question, when you have a single resolution, that's fine. But here we have the possible rescission of rescinding an existing resolution, creating a brand-new one, and affecting 2 or 3 others. So I think that the process in this case is a lot more complicated and a lot more integrated. So I would go to the experts and say, you understand what we're going to do at a high level, please get us to a more detailed level so we can make sure that we're making all the right moves with regard to first readings, second readings, and any changes in the resolutions.
Fair enough.
Other questions? All right, so consider this the first reading of M01 with an action item to refer back to Bylaws and Resolutions Committee. All right, so I guess I need to make a motion to, since the motion was for a first reading, then I'd like to move that we consider we accept the first reading with an amendment to refer back to Bylaws and Resolutions Committee. So I'll entertain a motion for referring back to the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion as amended with regard to referring the information back to the Bylaws and Resolution Committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? None. Okay. So we'll refer that back to the Bylaws and Resolution Committee. Now, this is a point of order. Since we don't have a parliamentarian, we'll just have to kind of go on our own guile. For example, and I'm saying this for the case of the public, all of these readings are sort of integrated with one another. So my question to my board colleagues is, do we want to talk about M10, C02, and M04, or are you more comfortable in using the initial discussions on M01 and the recommendation of taking it back to committee as a preliminary action and bypass these, or do you want to continue to discuss them while we're here, one-on-one, as more additional information for the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee?
I would think that we probably want to send it back and try to consolidate, if it has to be consolidated, or, whether rescinding the resolution and creating another one to get it back from as officially what they feel is the best way to go. I don't doubt that, Frank, that they've said, let's just do a new one. I don't have a problem with that. But it's probably a lot easier to do it that way.
So from a public persona perspective, you're not allowed to adjust the agenda of the meeting once you pass that meeting. So I'm a little bit of a dilemma. However, I think that perhaps we can, if we walk through it line item by line item, to say that, we're going to, first reading of M010, bring it up and just say refer to committee. First reading of CO2, refer to committee. So unless anybody has a problem with that, I think as a chair, I'm just going to move forward and say, since we've gotten through M01, the next item on the agenda is a first reading of M10. So I'll entertain a motion. Frank, that motion?
No, we want to have a first reading.
I'll make a motion that we do what you just said, basically.
But we can't change the agenda after we adopted the agenda. You can only do that at the beginning of the meeting.
Just read each line.
Yeah, just read each line,
And then we'll
vote to send it to committee. And then we've met the parliamentary procedure part of it. I know it's difficult, but, I don't want to be flippant and just go, okay, let's just skip through these and take them to committee, even though that's what we're going to do. I don't want to be dinged on the fact that we didn't follow parliamentary procedures. So
The
Frank,
others will
please.
go very quickly anyway. Okay. The next one is M10. That is the replacement resolution Let me find it here.
Here it is, Frank, right here. I got it on my computer.
I think it was missing in my packet too, Frank.
Right there. Let's give that back to me when you're done.
M10, creation of resolution M10. The purpose of this is to establish policies and procedures to ensure compliance with our declarations of restrictions and architectural guidelines when violations are reported.
There's a second.
Second.
All right. Discussion. I'll start. Refer to committee. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the creation of resolution M10 with the idea of pushing it back to committee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next item is C02. Frank?
Revision of resolution C02. The following changes are recommended per the following. You can see 2 words are struck out of directors, general managers included.
For second.
Second.
Discussion.
Send it to committee.
Refer to committee. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion with the requirement of sending to committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item, M04. Frank?
Revision of resolution M04. Revised M04 as followed via the noted deletions. Delete section 4.
Second.
Second.
Discussion?
Refer to committee.
Thank you. Seeing no more discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the revision M04 with the requirement to refer to committee, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next item, authorize council to develop wording and instruments required for erosion bonds to obtain legal fees. Frank? Frank?
There it is, I got it. Okay. The motion to authorize council to develop the wording and instruments required for Ocean Pines to obtain legal fees for non-collection matters. Motion to authorize council to develop the wording and instruments required for Ocean Pines to obtain legal fees for non-collection matters and to begin the signature collection process. Purpose and effect. The purpose of this motion is to enable Ocean Pines to recover legal fees associated with obtaining court orders necessary to force violators into compliance with our declaration of restrictions. Okay, the background. The wording of our current declaration of restrictions does not permit Ocean Pines to recover the cost of obtaining a court order to force compliance. Here's council's explanation as to why. With respect to the ability to obtain attorney's fees in court, Maryland law follows the common American rule, which states that generally a prevailing party is not awarded attorney's fees unless 1, the parties to a contract have an agreement to that effect, and 2, there is a statute that allows the imposition of such fees, and 3, the wrongful conduct of a defendant forces a plaintiff into litigation with a third party, or 4, a plaintiff is forced to defend against malicious prosecution. It refers the case Thomas versus Gladstone in the appropriate nomenclature for that. In the homeowners association context, the recorded declaration of restrictions is the contract. What this means for OPA is, in the event OPA takes legal action in court to enforce its governing documents, such as seeking a court order to compel a member to maintain his or her lot, or to authorize OPA to enter the lot, OPA would only be entitled to an award of its attorney's fees if the relevant section Declaration of Restrictions or the Maryland Homeowners Association Act authorizes the award of attorney's fees. Unlike the Maryland Condominium Act, which authorizes the award of attorney's fees for legal action brought by a condominium association, the HOA Act does not authorize the award of legal fees if a homeowners association is involved in legal action in court. The sections with no authority to obtain legal fees for non-collection matters are Section 1B, Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, Section 4, Section 5, Section 6, Section 7, Section 8, Section 9, Section 10, Section 10A, Section 11, Section 13, Section 14, Section 14B, Section 14C, Section 14D, Section 15A, and Section 18.
Is there a second? Discussion.
I had two things, two questions. Yeah, I'm sorry, Doug. Two things. First, who are we going to refer this to? Local counsel or Jeremy to work on that wording?
Probably, that's a good question, but I think it would be Jeremy, as they're our main counsel. And the former counsel has been really, and I'll let John explain it, retained to handle local matters, particularly those that involved violation of direct declaration of restrictions. However, Larry, both councils have been asked the same question. Both council are in agreement that we lack the wording for them to recover the costs.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I'm just wondering that if we're going to start using the local firm, that maybe we should have them do the work on this. And that's something to be decided, I guess, later. My second,
Okay, I'm sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
my second question is this. No, I'm all for recovering our attorney's fees. My question is, what's this going to cost us? How we're going to, if I understand the process correctly, and maybe Joe can answer yes or no by shaking his head if I'm correct. But I think we have to go back and go through the process of having each section vote on these DRs and approve it. And there has to be, a 50% approval rate by each section in the association to approve the DR, or to approve this change. And if in fact that's the case, what's that going to cost us? And are we really going to recover those fees anyway? That's my,
The answer, it's a matter of risk. Here's what, it's in the packet, the opinion of the attorney. But actually, what you'd need, and let's use, like, I think Section 1 as an example. You need an instrument with a signature on it from the majority of the people that vote in Section 1 to incorporate that change in the Declaration of Restrictions, okay? Now, how much that would cost, okay, and what that instrument looks like. I mean, he said it could be a petition, it could be like a card that they send back with their signature on it. You know, my guess is you're looking at something that's on the order of what an election would be in those sections, okay? Could be.
No, I have a, Larry, you done?
yeah,
All right,
they're
so,
the questions I have on
Yeah,
it.
I have a comment. It does involve costs. So clearly, the mechanism in which we would have to reach out to each one of the sections and the costs associated with that, plus the costs associated to development of the language is certainly there. Earlier in this meeting, we talked about 0.02% of the homeowners. You know, at what point, if we're going to make a fairly large investment, you know, in making this happen, we're only talking about dealing with 0.02% of our homeowners, is it worth it? And I'm not saying yes or no, that's a question in my mind, is it okay? Now, the other side of that, and I'm going to argue with myself, is that, but I understand we also need a mechanism, an instrument, some way to do some level of enforcement. I would offer, if there's some conjunction between our requirement just now to send a lot of things back to the Bylaws and Resolutions Committee, maybe we look at them first and say, what are they saying with regard to the resolutions? And then how do we make that to sort of, you know, align with what's in the DRs before we make the investment? Because we may find something out based on their expertise and their research that may be able to help us to control the costs if we decide to move forward and it makes sense to move forward. So I think there's a little bit more work that needs to be done there. I like the concept, but I'm not ready to say personally that we want to move forward with them developing the language, because they don't know what language they want to develop yet. And I think there's a lot of intersection points. There's a lot of things that, you know, are intertwined with regard to anything that we do that has as not only, Maryland law, not only the HOA law, but our bylaws and, and our declarations of restrictions and our resolutions. So I think there's a lot more work needs to be done there. I think Colette had her hand up first. Go ahead. Colette?
Do we have any idea how much these attorney costs are that we're going to recover per case?
Yeah, well, here, look, okay.
Is that a yes or a no?
Well, it's going to give you an answer.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of a dilemma, Colette, because here's, in the board packet, here's exactly what our attorneys have told us. Okay, the exact question that they were asked was, how much would it cost to get a court order? Okay, counsel in writing said the range of a court order could be up to $50,000. They said their experience is that normally it is $12,000 to $18,000. Okay, they said that cost depends on a number of things. It depends on, number one, the degree of fight that the violator has. If they retain an attorney and you go through depositions and you go through discovery and they decide to fight with you, okay, you could get into the upper numbers. Now, the counterbalance to that, which I think Doug is saying, and this is what our previous counsel has said and what the CPI group has said based on the past, is typically when you get into these situations and you go to the initial court order and you show up down at court, that the violators typically want to settle before they get before the judge. And you don't go through depositions and you don't go through discovery. But to quell the laughter from the media section, counsel has been asked point blank, current and previous, are these numbers wrong? And nobody has disputed that we could hit the upper limit. If we have somebody, like somebody right now, who's saying, I'll see you in the Maryland Court of Appeals. So it's an issue of risk, okay? And I don't think we have the choice not to enforce and not to demand speedy enforcement and speedy correction or violations of declarations of restrictions. The question is, how much risk do we want to take? Because there are 17 cases, and even if you just look at some just point blank easy numbers, okay? A filing fee is $165. Okay, it's going to take an attorney, okay, local attorney, 30 minutes to go down to Snow Hill to file and 30 minutes to come back. That time is not free. It's going to take them time to prepare that. Okay, the difference between over the bridge and local is not in the hourly rate. The difference is in the travel time from Montgomery County down to Snow Hill and back that we'd be paying for. Okay, so the issue is you're probably looking at each one of these 17 cases that John has, probably within shouting distance of $1,000 minimum.
Those 17 cases, only 9 of them are in sections that need the text revision.
Tom, you were next.
Do we have any numbers on, say, Bramblewood? Is there a number, how much money we've spent so far on attorney's fees? Is there a clue? Do we have a clue? I mean, we've had some of these that have been going on now for 3 boards prior. Is there any number of how much, does anybody have any clue how much the attorneys we've paid over and over to send letters and do all this legwork?
We do have those numbers, Tom, but don't have.
Excuse me, Robert's Rules of Order are still in effect. Harry.
Frank, I agree with what you're saying, but, in my own career, I've been involved in hundreds of litigation cases. I mean, hundreds. And the reality of it is, the majority of the cases are going to be settled. Very few are going to go to court. And as we have seen in the recent past here, as normally happens in litigation, in order to reach settlement, generally what happens is the plaintiffs, and in our case, in this situation would be us, we will agree, that's just what happens, to waive any of those costs or fees so that we can get the the homeowner to comply. That's the reality of how the litigation will go. That's what will happen if we get involved in a mediation. And that's what will happen if the attorney knows what he's doing for the homeowner, the defendant in this case. That's what they're going to look for to resolve the case. And quite honestly, I think, I would like to see us get the fees back. I just don't think from a realistic standpoint, we're not going to settle a case to reach compliance, which is what our main objective is. If we're not going to, if the homeowner says, well, I'll do what you need me to do, but I'm not paying any attorney's fees. And what's going to happen? We're going to say, because again, my experience over hundreds and hundreds of cases is, all right, let's get the compliance taken care of because that's the most important thing, and the fees will be waived. And so that goes back to my question. What's it going to cost us to do this in every section that has to have it done? And what's the reality of us recovering any of those fees anyway? We may have a big case. Bramblewood may be a big case. But as we've seen, most of these cases, they're resolved before we get to that point.
Most will not go, clearly, most will not go under.
Please be recognized by the chair. Frank?
Yeah, clearly, most will not, it's 100%, Larry, a question of what is the board's appetite for the risk? Because if they not go under and, okay, let's say we spend $17,000 to clean up everything and have right now 0 cases outstanding, okay? We've done our job as a homeowners association. And I think you can make an argument that the 8,452 assessment payers have all contributed to that, and that's part of the dues of being part of the association, okay? And I would be perfectly accepting of that. Where things will hit the fan is if you have one that goes to the Maryland Court of Appeals and it costs us into 6 figures and the legal fees go through the ceiling and we haven't taken the steps necessary to recover the cost if the judge would feel compelled to give them to us.
Barry?
Oh, really? Well, and again, the other point to this, and again, I'd love to see us get all this money back. The reality of it is, how many of these cases do we have where the people, or Tom had mentioned early on, where they just don't have the money, or regardless whether the court awards the fees and costs anyway, are we going to get it? So.
Doug, just
Bill?
one final comment. I think that the conversation that we're having here is very, very interesting, but I would err on the side of at least having the leverage. We have the leverage to attain legal fees in various cases. We can, as a plaintiff, we can waive those legal fees. We can do whatever we want, but at least gives us some bargaining power. And I would like to see us move forward with that. I mean, I have been in cases, and I have settled most of my cases in this regard. And I have waived legal fees, absolutely. I have done that in the best interest of trying to get cases resolved for plaintiffs. But I think we need the leverage.
All right, I think we've talked. I'll entertain one more comment. Any other?
If I can.
Yes,
Thank
Tom,
you.
thank
I
you.
mean, my God, man. I don't know if you have to throw stuff. But to answer, to go right back to Larry's point, the fact is you stated in all the cases that you've done, your negotiation was to waive fees. At this point, we can't charge fees. So
That's right.
what do we have to waive? We don't have an opportunity to negotiate. They just go, you know what, you can't charge us fees anyway. I don't know how it'll work. I'm not a lawyer, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express. I'm just saying, if you're saying that we waive fees in order to negotiate compliance, then that would be great if we had fees. Since we don't have fees, there's nothing to waive. And that's it. Now you don't have to take more questions.
All right, we've kind of beat through this. The idea here is hopefully we've got enough information to make a vote. So seeing no more, I'll close the floor for discussion and call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Vote.
I'm opposed.
Right, I'm opposed. Please, no recount. All those in favor, please say aye. Hold your hand.
Aye.
That's It's three. All those, that's what I did. I said show of hands, please. So it's three. All those opposed? Four. Okay, the motion is defeated. All right. Next item on the agenda has been added based on us amending the agenda. It's a first reading of F03. Larry?
I move to amend Resolution F03 as listed in the package that I've given to you. In essence, this is the motion that I presented at our last board meeting and withdrew because it is properly handled by amending Resolution F03. And for the board's edification, after the last meeting, Jim Trummell and I sat down, went through the resolution, and actually Jim, after our discussions, did prepare the changes to F03. So I'll just go ahead and read the red line changes.
First of all, you have to
Oh,
read the
I'm sorry.
motion. It has to be seconded, and then we can move into discussion.
Okay.
All right. So you've read the motion for a change to F03. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion. Larry, please.
Okay, so let me read the, we get into the background. Current funding of the new capital requires the board to budget projects through the operational budget. The effect of new capital costs are directly added to the annual assessment. Controlling the increase in the annual assessment has and can continue to cause this and future boards to attempt to control assessment increases by not making necessary new capital purchases. The discussion, a reserve account dedicated to new capital expenditures will allow for better financial planning and control without directly impacting the association's yearly assessment. It will also eliminate the tendencies to forego necessary new capital purchases and projects because of the direct impact on the annual assessment. And as I said, the changes to F03 would include at section 4, we would be adding D, which under reserve accounts would be new capital reserve. This reserve is for assets with functionality that were never previously owned by OPA. There are various small letter changes because of the changes in the, by adding that section. The next major change is at 8, and it is new capital reserve funding and controls. A, funding for this account will come from up to 10% of the yearly replacement reserve. B, the account shall not exceed $1 million after the yearly contribution as of the new fiscal year. A maximum of $500,000 may be spent in any one fiscal year. And then there are a couple other number changes to the paragraphs. Again, the changes were done in conjunction with Jim Trummell to make sure that that the bylaws committee would be on board. And there we are.
Comments?
Questions? Okay. My understanding of our current reserve situation is that we conducted a reserve study from DMA, and that the Budget and Finance Committee established target ranges that each reserve should be in for us to feel comfortable, and that with the exception of the road reserve, we are either at the minimum or approaching the minimum for each of, approaching it but not hitting the minimum for each of those accounts. Is that factually correct?
Yes. Currently, we're based on the reserve study, the Budget and Finance Committee, as approved by the board, our projected goals for our replacement reserve account. And this, again, this does not affect bulkheads or roads. For the replacement reserve account was 22 to 28%. We are at 18%, and by initiating this process for the upcoming budget year, this would delay us getting to the 22% goal. Instead of getting there in 3 years, we would get there in 4 years. So it's delaying it by 1 year. if, that's if, we allocated 10% of the incoming reserve dollars. Now, the motion says that we would do up to 10% and not a straight 10% every year. The idea being that based on what is presented during the budget and finance process, what projected new capital spends are reviewed and approved, then we would, my thought process would be that if in fact we thought we were going to spend $100,000 in new capital, that we would probably want to increase, take, maybe 150,000 from those replacement reserves, put it in this account, and over time build this reserve, new capital reserve account, as opposed to dealing with exactly what John talked about earlier today, where we have $12,000 of new capital that was purchased this year because of because we're not capitalizing anything under $5,000, and that goes directly onto it goes onto the operational budget that, first off, is not budgeted for because it's under $5,000. So it would address those issues from an operational standpoint, as well as instead of making decisions on new capital expenditures, and as you know from past budget processes, the board is very concerned about raising the assessments, as we should be, and eliminating projects that could be small things, mostly are small things, because we talked about the numbers. We're only averaging about $150,000 a year in new capital expenditures, which does not include the projects that have been that have been requested year after year that were not approved. So while I understand what your question is, Frank, I don't think that delaying getting to that 22% goal of our replacement reserve dollars, I don't see that as an issue, because we're not talking about a tremendous amount of money.
That leads to the second question. We talk about it's not impacting assessment, but $200 of the current assessment goes into the replacement reserves. So if 200 is going in and we're draining money out to fund this new account, then, and it's causing us to be below our targets, then as we consistently spend that $150,000, then we're either going to consistently be below our targets, or we're going to have to increase our assessment to cover our reserves.
No.
Explain that to me.
The projections, we ran the projections, and I think I sent the spreadsheet out to you guys probably 2 months ago, that building in that 10% draw off the replacement reserves delays us getting to the 22% goal by 1 more year. We're not there now. We're not going to be there next year. It's going to take us 3 years to get to that 22%, even if we don't take money out and shift it to new capital. It'll delay it by 1 year. And then, and in 4 years, we will be at 22%, and that percentage will increase as we move forward.
I have a couple of questions and concerns. So when you're looking at item number 8, new capital, the amount shall not exceed $1 million after the yearly contributions in new fiscal and a maximum of $500,000. Well, if I look at the numbers that have been bannered about with regard to the amount of capital expenses we've had over the years, are these numbers out of proportion? I mean, we're funding something at a high rate, borrowing off, let me finish this because it'll take a while. We're borrowing off of or shifting off of the reserve account to build something out, and then we're stockpiling at a different rate than we're actually spending. So my question would be, why are we trying to get 10% of the reserve funding to put something in there that we've traditionally not had that level of spending? Second part of my concern, where's the plan? Where do we have a list of things that are upcoming capital asks All right, I have not seen that. Our strategic planning committee is quite not functioning right now. It's not their fault, just there hasn't been any push to do that. I, for one, have no interest in putting money into an account without a plan on what we're going to do to use it. All right, and I've said that before. I said that at the other meeting. I will not support this blind faith, oh, let's just take 10% of reserve. Quite frankly, and I'll assume, although I trust but verify, that moving money out of the reserve account into a capital account, whether it's legally we can do that or whether it's, just a poor use of sort of accounting procedures, don't know. But, that's another cause of concern. Reading back through the general definition of reserves, which are the portions of net equity association appropriated for future use and specific purposes, not included in reserves, are non-appropriated equity and equity invested in fixed assets. So the question would be, can we even do that, by taking it out? Now, I know there's a provision in the bylaws that said we can actually, by, was it supermajority, 2/3, can actually pull out monies from the reserve in an emergency, but I don't know if one could argue that this is an actual emergency that we're dealing with. So let me finish.
Okay.
So again, my concern is twofold. Number one, the funding levels. Number two, the funding mechanism. Number three, the plan. All right, because, and then we get to that point, then you're going to hear me ask about, okay, authority for disbursement of the expenses. How do we control that? I've said that in the past already, in the past two meetings. What are we doing to control this expense? Any four directors can come in and got $1 million to build a bowling alley. All right, I don't ascribe to that approach. There's got to be, if we're spending a lot of time. The other thing, if you look at the resolutions, there's also a provision to allow for multi-year budgets. Okay, so we're looking at something that carries over to another year. If we're managing that account, okay, are you just managing it for a year? No, you'll never manage a capital improvement or a capital expense fund for a single year. You're going to look at a multi-year project, and it could be that it takes that long not only to build a plan, justify the expense, and then actually deliver it. So again, I just have a little bit of a concern that we're not hitting the target here. I get the concept is sound, but I'm still not feeling that we've got the right mechanism in place that allows the controls that I think are absolutely required in order for us to manage the association's funds properly with regard to new capital purchases.
Can I address that?
Please.
Okay. First off, the issue of planning is a process that occurs during the Budget and Finance Committee every year. There's a plan put together, and as part of this, the general manager will be preparing, as we have discussed this year. We will start keeping a rolling new capital project plan. So does one exist today? No, but it will be developed as the projects or items are recommended by the department heads during this budget process. That's the same process that occurs every year. In regard to putting the money aside and then any four directors coming in and deciding to pull the money out and spend it, we can do the same thing with the replacement reserve account. So quite honestly, I don't buy that argument. That the board can do that at any time. This account, while you may think $1 million and $500,000 is a lot of money, the reason those numbers are in there today is anticipation of what may be down the road 10, 15, 20 years from now, so that the resolution doesn't have to go back and be changed. If those numbers are, when you look at the control of only allocating up to 10%, and this coming year, our replacement reserve number will be about $2 million, so we would be looking at a maximum, $200,000 going into that account. If we are spending about $150,000 on average on new capital expenditures, I don't see what the issue is. What it does is it removes that direct impact on our assessments, and it removes the motivation of the board not to approve projects or items, and this is not just projects, this is items that are that the association may need, or to improve the quality of life here in the association. Having sat through the budget process the last 2 years on the Budget and Finance Committee, and in the past as just a homeowner, watching the board struggle with getting things done here, it ultimately comes back to how much are we willing to raise the assessment? And that's the problem, because items and things that would have benefited this community have been delayed, because we don't have a mechanism in place to take that assessment increase away. Your questions are all valid, Doug, but the planning issue was done every budget process. That's nothing new. John and I have discussed it from the general manager standpoint. There will be an ongoing plan. Actually, you know, it was something that, one of the good things that JB recommended, that we have a plan, a list of items, whether it be a project or, you know, some other piece of equipment that we need, that can go on that list so that it can be properly managed. That, the Budget and Finance Committee and the board currently manages that, and we would still manage that. So how it's being controlled, that's for us to control through the budget process.
Frank?
On the issue of controls, you know, I think that the truth is the planning seems to ebb and flow. There have been times where there hasn't been capital plans, and there have been times when they have been in place. And I think that we need additional controls to make sure that if a capital plan disappears because of an administration change down the road, 5, 10, X number of years, that no money's moved. Second thing I want to talk about is alternative funding, because at one time we at least discussed the park mechanism, which truly avoids the assessments, okay? And I read the thing where the Budget and Finance Committee said they prefer this method over that method. But my question is, did somebody run a hard set of numbers against what could happen, even before we run any numbers? Number one, I don't know that we can legally do that, so that approach may be killed. And by the way, Larry, just so I agree we need a new capital fund, but I would like to see first off, can we do the park approach Ocean Pines wide? Because they clearly avoid the assessment issue. Second of all, against a real set of numbers, a plan that John's developing that'll be here, I guess, by December 1st. Okay, can we run, if we can do that, that set of numbers to see what the impact would be in terms of both building this fund and what it would be on the assessment? Because just theoretically, from something you told me, if we sold 400 houses last year, one of your concerns was we'd have this enormous fund to build up, okay? But if we can do that at a reduced rate from what they do at the park, which is $1,000 a house, as I understand it, okay? You can build this fund over time, and when you hit $1 million, it seems to me that you can have a control mechanism in there that says when you hit $1 million, then you allocate those funds to the reserve accounts that are worst case underfunded, not within the ratios. And that is a true reduction in the assessment. But I haven't seen, I mean, I don't know if we can legally do it, and I haven't seen a set of numbers to prove that out one way or the other against this method. I'm open to this method, but I would like to look at that other method as an alternative, because it's intriguing in that it truly gets what you want, a capital fund, and truly bypasses the assessment mechanism.
Larry?
Okay, so let's talk about the numbers, and let's talk about the parks process. And again, this was all reviewed through the Budget and Finance Committee, and as you said, Frank, they were strongly against it. So we sell, and I went back and checked, we sell about 50 homes a year in Ocean Pines. Oh, I'm sorry, 452 in Ocean Pines. And in the park, of that, about 50 of them are in the park. Okay, so $1,000 for those 50 homes is $50,000 for the park. If we were to do that $1,000, that would be $400,000 here. Now, whether we did it at a smaller number, you know, that's another issue. But you know, I heard last time the old refrain, you're building a slush fund. I don't accept that. $400,000, even if we did it at $500, that we would be asking people again at settlement to put up $500 more. It's $200,000 a year. Over 10 years, that's going to be $2 million. And I would think that once we start that process, we're not going to be able to stop it.
Right.
So now you're talking about taking that money and shifting it somewhere else. Now we're talking about doing another resolution. And the Budget and Finance Committees, and I agree with this, the last thing we want to do is add another charge at closing for people who are buying a home here in Ocean Pines. So that's why that process that they're using in the park, which may work well for the park, is not being recommended by the Budget and Finance Committee. So they're not recommending it, and I agree with it. I don't think that's the way we ought to go. Again, the numbers we're talking about here, you know, even at full 10% a year, we're talking $200,000. And if we're spending an average of $150,000 for this account to build up to $1 million, it's going to take 20 years. And in 20 years, we may need that $1 million in there. So the other control is the $500,000 a year spend. We're not spending $500,000 a year today on capital, new capital. So those numbers are, in reality, sort of irrelevant because we're not going to be taking that much money, and we're not going to be spending that much money today. And again, I just want to, again, this idea that 4 guys are going to come in here, or ladies, and decide to build a bowling alley, they could do that anyway and take the money out of the replacement reserves. There's nothing to stop them from doing that. And that's the reality of it. So.
What?
I just wanted to second that I am not in favor of the park plan at all. I don't want to add anything to anybody's closing costs for this kind of a fund. I think the plan that Larry has laid out makes a lot of sense to me. I think it has minimal impact. And I think the controls are there. I do see in the budget processes I've been through, each department puts forth some items that they want for capital spend. We evaluate those, but I've seen those stymied. Of course, the 2 years I've been on the board, we've been dealing with the deficit. And so there's been no capital spend, or very little capital spend. And, you know, I'm not anticipating that we're going to continue to be in a negative position. We're doing very well now, and I think we're going to continue. But I really believe that this is a sound plan. I think the controls are there, and, you know, I definitely support this concept.
Other discussion? Tom?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Doug. I don't like putting together a fund for projects that aren't on the books, that are just wish list projects. That's why we do the budget every year. We've had problems 2 years before and 3 years before because we have had no income. We've been losing money right and left. Now that we're finally making money, it looks easy to just take 10% from the reserve account, start a new capital account just in case. And how much did we spend last year in new capital? Was it like $56,000 or something? Wasn't it really small a number? Huh?
Small.
Yeah, very small. So, I mean, it was just something that we didn't include. So I just don't like putting together a fund that builds over every year. I'm not going to be on the board forever. I don't know who's going to be in charge, but I don't want $500,000 to $1 million just sitting there that any 4 board members can take and do whatever they like with. Put it in the budget if you want it done. If Colby wants something done next year, we put it in the budget, we figure out if we can afford to do it, and we do it. If we can't do it, then we make more money next year at the yacht club or wherever else. We cut payroll, or whatever John's doing to make our numbers look so great, and we keep adding all these wonderful things in. I didn't mean your payroll, I just meant someone's payroll. My point is that we're going in the right direction. I don't really want to put in, I don't like making a
Tommy.
fund for future projects we don't have, because the money's just gonna be sitting there, and it's gonna be too easy for someone to go and use it.
Wait, can I address that too?
Hold on one second.
Might I, Larry, just one last comment. I do have to support and concur with the thoughts put forth by Colette and Larry. This community is aging, and I really, really think that we need to be cognizant of that and be prepared for that. Doug, with all due respect for you, I think that you've shown leadership that a board like this needs, and you're setting a template. I hope that template continues. I have every faith that it will. And I think that this is a very sound way to go. I, too, would hate to see additional costs put on at closing, because I think it's a detriment. So I would be in favor of this proposal.
Larry?
Yeah, and I just wanted to go back to address one of the issues that Tom had. Tom, you're exactly right. We didn't spend a lot on new capital this year. We're probably only going to spend, I think $12,000, John, was that the number? And the reason is because we've been watching our pennies because of the financial situation we're in. And that's great. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things out there that should be done, that can be done if we properly manage our accounts. And again, I sat down with, I'm not a financial genius, but I sat down with some financial geniuses and went through this plan with them, and they concur that for what we need to do in this association, that this is the best way to do it. So I would,
So, again, all good conversation. One of the things in listening to all this, it kind of occurred to me that perhaps, and I want to get some feedback, is, we've had this strategic planning committee on the books, okay? I think now it's time, because I'd hate to have everything coming directly from the Budget and Finance Committee, because that's always going to be, and this is not meant to be slighted, but it's always going to come from this sort of financial, analytical, viewpoint of pure dollars and cents. Perhaps it's time to get the Strategic Planning Committee to look at it from a more holistic, maybe a different perspective, and then obviously, sort of coordinate with not only the Budget and Finance Committee, but the board, since they're an advisory committee, to come up with this understanding of what really needs to be done over the next 5 to 10 years. Cameron, your point was well taken. We are an aging community, and then Larry, your point was well taken, the fact that we have been watching our pennies, and we have been kind of saying, well, no, let's not add that, because I've been through 4 budget processes now, and we tend to go, nope, let's hold off on that, let's see how much more we can do that. But so, again, other than, the idea of, taking it out of the funding reserves, I would also add that I think the park scenario is intriguing, but, I don't know, would it be a deterrent? In other words, you mentioned 400 and some odd houses every year. If they know they got to spend an extra amount of that, does that turn into 275 houses a year? I don't know. Another deterrent in living Ocean Pines. Of course, I like to think that if they're buying a $300,000 house, $500 is not going to sway them one way or the other. But it's a point well taken. So, I wonder if and I don't want to paint the wrong picture. I'm in support of some funding mechanism for capital purchases, okay? So we have to put it in place, and if it's agreement, the majority of the board believes, taking 10% of the reserve or up to 10% of the reserves in order to do that, that's fine. I'll be bird dogging the idea of, authorizing the spending, and bird dogging the idea of strategic planning, okay? Because again, I want the association members to know, here's what's on the docket. Here's what we're looking at over the next 3 to 5 years. Do you concur? Are there things that we should be doing that aren't on this list? And start to formulate a plan, and I think it's exactly what the Strategic Planning Committee should be doing, canvassing our membership along with our help, and getting that information from the community into us so we can start putting items on that, rather than, I don't know if it's terms of good one, rather the wish list, okay, for capital purchases, and then turn around, start to substantiate them, place the business case, and then justify the expense of. As long as that's happening, I'll feel comfortable. But absent of those kinds of A, planning efforts, and B, controls, you're still going to hear me up here going, I don't use that old term that somebody else said, slush fund, but, I will watch that like a hawk, because I will, in my tenure, I just will not want to let that happen. So, but generally, I agree with, you know, the notion. Again, by the way, we're not deciding anything tonight. This is a first reading, okay? So, but it's just good discussion. We're not voting on anything tonight, all right? So so I'll tell you, in the interest of time, we do have a lot of other things to take care of. So in the interest of time, I'll entertain one more comment. Frank, you get the closing comment.
Okay. Two things. Look, I agree. We need a new capital fund. And funding methods aside, because some things are more intriguing than the others, I mean, I could live with this if we had the additional control mechanism in there that clearly stated no funds are moved in no year where we don't have a capital improvement plan, long-term, from the general manager approved by the board.
Can I address that?
I said
This
one
is
more
the last
comment.
thing, well, because this
I said
goes back.
one more comment. Let's close it.
This goes to the discussions that Jim Trummell and I had, Frank, and if you remember from when I presented this motion, I had stricter controls on this thing, and what you're asking to do, we can't do, because the board can go ahead and move the money anyway. It's just like the replacement reserve fund, we can say whatever we want, but you know, 2/3 come in and say, this is what we're going to do. That's what the bylaws say.
By the way, I just had a reading to rescind a motion. I understand, okay? But I would still like to state it. One other thing, Doug, and this was the second part of my last comment.
How many more? This is the last comment.
It was the
okay?
strategic planning. Look, I think that strategic planning should definitely take center stage. It's been with the last general managers. I think it should be a work group. We can't have a committee write a plan for John and his team to execute. It has to be a plan that maybe John has resources in the community, and that committee, which hasn't met, has tremendous resources that have expertise in this area. But as a work group, it would be more functional because it has to be his plan that we approve, not some committee's plan that goes some circular around. That's why we never got anywhere. It has to be an operating plan approved by the board.
All right, understood. We'll, point taken, we'll have to address that. All right. Seeing no more discussion, I just want to recognize that we don't have to really vote on anything. We just have to recognize that a first reading of F03 has been accomplished, so please note that in our meeting minutes. That concludes new business for the day. Next item on the agenda are appointments. There are actually two more based on the amended agenda. Ken Wolf is chair of the Environmental and Natural Assets Committee. Mo Delcher, first term Strategic Planning. George Solyak, first term Budget and Finance. Brian Reynolds, first term Budget and Finance. Unless there is an aversion to taking all four of those appointments at once, I'd entertain a motion to accept all four appointments.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on any one of the members? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the four appointments as noted, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, please note that those appointments are made. Next item on the agenda is an adjournment to closed session. I'll entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Colette, please read the,
We have
it was actually stated at the beginning of the meeting.
two motions. One, to discuss matters pertaining to employees and personnel, specifically pertaining to extension of the general manager's contract. The second one is to discuss terms or conditions of a business transaction in the negotiation stage, specifically pertaining to contracting for staging area for the bulkhead program.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, meeting's adjourned in a closed session. Thank you.